All right, everybody, thank you for joining. Today's mothering moment. Excuse my crazy hair. Let me prop this up somewhere. No, not gonna work. Okay, I guess I'm just gonna have to hold it again. Today's mothering moment, I wanted to talk about food and staying sane when feeding kids. And please excuse my hair. Yeah, it's a rare morning when I can take a shower successfully. So it's been a success, but I look a little bit worse for wear. Anyway, I wanted to talk about food and food sanity with kids, because there seems to be a lot of issues and problems surrounding the area of feeding kids. I don't like this background, and I'm going to go outside. So hold on for 1 second. That'll give all the stragglers a chance to get in here. So I guess I should start out by talking about our house situation again. All right, this is much nicer out here. This will help my messy hair not look quite so awful. All right, that's a better background than a gray wall. Sorry to all of you that don't live in Arizona, where it's going to be another terrible 70-degree day today. So I wanted to talk about food. There's a lot of issues surrounding kids and food. Seems to be a constant source of frustration. So I want to talk about picky eating, snacking, and things like that. And if you have any questions, then feel free to leave them in the comments. So one thing I get asked about a lot is picky eating. How do I deal with picky eating? And the short answer is that we do not allow picky eating. So I think that a lot of the food problems that people struggle with food is kind of rooted in maybe more of an American, I don't know, like perception of kids and food and how kids should eat. And I think some of the problems that American moms see, other moms the world over don't struggle with so much. I think there's just a lot of guilt and anxiety that American moms feel over food. And I think it stems from the fact that obviously food is a basic human need, that obviously children have to have that need met. So because it is a basic human need, the signal is choppy. Oh, that's bad. Maybe I need to go back in with a horrible gray background. Does anybody else have a choppy signal? Or is that just... Okay, I'll just wait and see. So I think a lot of the anxiety stems from the fact that it is a basic human need. And kids, unfortunately, my kids, probably everybody's kids, will exploit anything that they can. So if they know there's an area of life where they have a right to something, and, you know, truly, legitimately so, they have a right to eat, they will try to use that to exert power or influence over their parents and maybe guilt trip them. If they can guilt trip the parent, they will guilt trip the parent. And I don't think that's only true for my kids. I think that's just universal for kids everywhere. It just comes with the territory. You know, kids are born entirely self-absorbed. And, you know, that's a good thing in a baby because they have to survive. So they're a little bit self-absorbed and, you know, they think they're the center of the universe and they think the world owes them something, which it does. But as they mature, they, you know, sometimes have to learn that the world, in fact, does not revolve around them. And the area of food seems to be one where parents are more reluctant than any other to maybe lay down the law. So picky eating is one big thing. You know, kids, they don't like a food, they don't eat it. And people are like, well, what do I do? Do I force them to eat? Then they cry, they get sick. What do I do? You know, I believe that picky eating is a sin. And, the Bible has multiple passages where it talks about, eating what's put in front of you with thankfulness, receiving that what's been given you. And I do believe that being unthankful and rejecting what we have been given is a sin. And it's the same for kids. Now, of course, there's a way to go overboard on this and expect your kids to eat escargot or something crazy like that. And I'm not talking about that. If you have my cookbook and you see what kind of meals we make, you know that everything in there is mainstream. The only thing in there that could even be considered, maybe not appealing to kids is shrimp, but there's an alternative for chicken, and I don't force my kids to eat shrimp if they don't want to eat shrimp. Everything else in there is just staples, normal, healthy, mainline food that anybody should be eating if they want to live a normal, functional adult life, where they're not at every restaurant having to get every dish special made, and where they can never go to any function because there's onions in this dish and that dish has a different ingredient that they don't like. You're not doing your kids any favors. Now, personally, I was raised in a home where my mom made us eat everything, and I'm very thankful for that. And the reason why she said she had that philosophy is because she herself was a very picky eater. Her mother, my grandma, bless her heart, she was the sweetest lady, but I guess she did not enforce, picky eating, or rather, fight against picky eating. So my mom grew up disliking several foods. I know she would not eat tomatoes, would not eat cheese, things that are just basic staples, would not touch fish. So things like that. And my mom had vowed that she did not want us to be raised the way she was, where we were just picky eaters. So we grew up and we were expected to eat everything that was a mainline thing. And I'm very, very thankful for that. So I've used the same approach with my kids. So basically the way I approach picky eating is that our kids have to eat what's put in front of them. If they don't like the food, then it gets put away for the next meal and brought out at the next meal until it's gone. And the Bible says that to the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. No matter how much you dislike a food, if you get hungry enough, you will like it and you will eat it. So that's how we approach picky eating in our house. It's, you don't eat again until you've eaten what you've been given. Of course, like I said, I'm not expecting them to eat weird, crazy stuff, but things like tomatoes or potatoes, they're not allowed to just like, I don't like potatoes except in French fries. I had one kid who was like that. He only wanted to eat potatoes in French fries. Well, if you can eat potatoes in French fries, it sounds to me like you can eat potatoes in every other form as well, and probably healthier forms. So, if it's something weird, exotic, off the wall, I don't force them to eat it. If it's a main staple that everybody eats, like meat, you can't just say, I don't eat meat, I don't eat gravy, I don't, things like that. Just, you're supposed to like the staples. So my approach to that is, if you don't like it, I put it away for the next meal, and you can eat it at the next meal. Now, of course, with 10 kids, that could quickly descend into, okay, I now have to cover, label, and reheat 10 different plates. And I don't do that. I mean, I'll cover it and I'll label it, but if they want to eat it at the next meal, if they have to eat it at the next meal, really, I should say, they eat it cold out of the fridge. We don't have a microwave, and I'm not going to sit there and take out 10 pots because, of course, I can't heat it all up in the same pot because I'm going to be contaminated. Then you eat it cold. So I always tell them, if you didn't like it hot the first time, you're not really going to like it anymore cold the second time around. And it is very, very rare. It's never come to the fact that they had to pull it out of the third meal. They eat it at the second meal at the latest. And even that's extremely rare that happens. Usually I just set a timer for them if they're lollygagging at a meal, and I'm like, okay, you have 5 minutes, you have 10 minutes to finish your food. And, if you don't, it goes in the fridge and you can have it cold at the next meal. And, invariably they finish up the meal quickly at that point. So that's the thing of picky eating. There's another issue with food that, the amount of food. And that can go both ways. That can go with kids who, when they love the meal, wanting to get seconds and thirds and fourths and just gorging them on a food that they like. Or if it's something that they don't like, they are like, it's not that I don't like the food, I'm just not hungry. And then again, I would be left with the dilemma of having just all these dishes that just take up my fridge of having to reheat the food. I'm going to quickly interrupt to answer 2 questions. At what age do I implement that, where I put the food away until the child eats it? I would say probably right around age 3 or 4. I'm very lenient with the toddlers, and obviously I don't enforce anything on the babies when they're first starting to eat. So I would say around age 3 or 4 is when I start stepping up the expectations a little bit. Why do we not have a microwave? Because microwaves destroy the nutrients in food and render them completely worthless as far as nutrition is concerned. But I believe there's also strong indication that it makes the food toxic and carcinogenic. So as long as we had a microwave, I kept using it because it's so convenient. And finally, I just asked my husband to just get a built-in microwave and just like rip the thing out and throw it away, because I'm going to keep using it while it's in the house. So one day he did just that. He removed the microwave and instead made a spice shelf there for me. And I heat leftovers, because we do have leftovers for lunch every day. I heat them on the stove or in the oven, but that's not individual plates. That's just like a pot full of food or a dish full of food that I can slide in the oven, and that's not been eaten of before, and I just reheat that for the whole family. So to get back on the topic of amounts of food, it can go both ways. Kids either wanting to eat a lot less or kids wanting to eat a lot more. And especially the eating more with teenagers is a big thing. I find that kids, typically by the age they're about 6 or 8, eat as much as an adult, which seems ridiculous because they're so little, but they're growing so fast. And by the time they get to be a teenager, I mean, probably by the time they're like in their early teens, like not even teens, just like in their early 10s, I should say, like 11, 12, our kids eat more than either of us parents eats. Because again, they're growing just such an astounding rate, and they're very active, and so they eat huge amounts of food, and there's a tendency for them to, especially if we make something they like, for example, like schnitzel or corn dogs, or they would just gorge themselves and get sick on it. And on the other hand, when it's something that they don't care for so much, they're just like, well, I'm not really hungry, so I'm just going to sit out this meal and eat double at the next meal. So I rarely make exceptions for that. Typically, I fill everybody's plate. It's just faster that way. I just make like an assembly line of plates and fill everybody's plate. And I tell them, you're not that unique to where you have a vastly greater or smaller appetite than other kids your age. And having been through this parenting thing for 18 years, I have a pretty good grasp on what amount of food a child your size eats. I mean, it's a normal range. So if I fix their plate, they have to right then, before they start eating, either before I fix their plate or before they start eating, if they're truly not feeling well and they don't want to eat a lot that day because they're not feeling well, or if they were physically active all day and are just needing to eat extra, like the boys have been working at the house every day, then they have to tell me that before they start eating. Because you're not going to believe this, but filling 12 plates is already a lot of work, and I don't want to go back around when I finally fix my plate last and I sit down. By the time I sit down and done fixing my plate, the first one is done, and they're like, okay, I want more. And I did that for a long time, and finally I realized, when they come back for a second, sometimes they would get just as little as like a tablespoon of food, which is ridiculous. The human body has a bit of an error margin. You can eat 1 tablespoon more than you wanted to eat or 1 tablespoon less than you wanted to eat, and you will still be just fine. So as far as the amounts go, they have to tell me before they start eating. They can't look at a dish, think they're going to like it, then eat off it and be like, well, this is actually way too much for me, because they realize I don't like it. Because now I'm stuck with this dish that's been eaten of, and if they don't eat it, it'll just go in the trash, and I don't want to throw away food. We use mostly organic ingredients, and everything is sourced from really good sources. I mean, the best that we can provide. So, being wasteful would be a sin anytime, but it's also just, it's just such a waste of money that I don't want to do that. So as far as amounts go, I decide an amount that would be reasonable for them, and that's just what they're eating, you know, that's what they're getting. And like I said, if they're sick and they want to tell me ahead of time I'm not feeling well or whatever, or I'm really hungry today because I was working all day, then of course they can have extra. I'm not saying to make the kids just, you know, not feed them enough or whatever. So that might seem like a radical idea, but if you went to a restaurant and you put in your order, they make the same size portion for any person who orders that particular dish. If you go to any restaurant and you order any dish, they will give you the same exact size as the next person who orders that same dish. So it's not that customized to where, okay, what can you tell me just exactly on a scale of 1 to 100 how hungry you are, so we can just adjust your plate down to 1/10 of an ounce and make sure that you get just the exact correct amount. That's ludicrous. So whenever you have a large family, you have to kind of run things the way a commercial operation like a restaurant would run. But even families with fewer kids, smaller families, can adapt those same exact methods and maintain their sanity. You know, if it works for a large family, it works even better for a small family. There's really no reason, if you only have 1 or 2 kids, to make them spoiled and coddled and just cater to them and make them little snowflakes. You know, their future spouse is not going to be thanking you when they have to cook for a picky eater who doesn't like this and doesn't like that, and well, you put a little bit of onion in here and you put vinegar there and mustard here, and I just don't like this and I don't like that. So having to live with a picky eater, having to cook for a picky eater, your future in-laws are not going to thank you for that, your son or daughter-in-law. So that's for the amounts of food. So again, I fix their plates and it's just faster that way. And I do give seconds if they're really hungry. I'm not like, no, you can't have seconds, but I try to greatly cut down on seconds. Or if they come to me, I've had it where they're like, this is too much food. And I'm like, how much do you want me to take off? And it was literally like a tablespoon worth of food. And it's like, no, don't interrupt my meal so I can remove a tablespoon of food from your plate. So that's for the picky eating and the food. And then I think the other big thing is the snacking. Oh man, I can't even imagine, Cassie. That's, yeah, no. See, cheese is a must in our house, and all our kids like cheese, thankfully. My mom was one who did not like cheese, and it was hard. For her, she couldn't eat pizza, she couldn't eat this or that. I can't imagine. It's like its own food group for me. You have to eat cheese. So, and you know, funny thing, all my siblings, we all turned out not being picky eaters, and I think we're all very thankful for it. We had a cousin, my mom's sister. She had 3 kids, and out of her 3 kids, I remember at least 2 were severely picky. Extremely picky. And one of those cousins would come to my house, and he was my exact age, and my brothers were good friends with him because they were, you know, just a year or 2 older. And he would come to our house, and he was the pickiest eater that you will ever see. He would not touch fruit, like literally would not touch fruit, would not eat any fruit or vegetable, would not even eat hardly, like I remember he didn't like hot dogs because hot dogs have casing, and the hot dog casing freaked him out. Hi, Pico. Go back in the house, Pico. All right, here comes Chloe. She's doing the thing that I'm going to talk about next that they shouldn't do, which is snacking. Chloe, what are you doing with the granola bars? So I think that was always a good reminder to us and my mom of why we did not want to grow up to be picky eaters. A 2-year-old that is picky, I would not be strict with. A 2-year-old that is picky, I would still just keep offering the food. Like I said, I don't actually start enforcing this until they're closer to 3 or 4. I know with the younger kids, sometimes there can be texture issues. For example, Boaz does not eat any lettuce yet. And I'm sure that with age he will, but at his age right now, 4, if he eats lettuce, and I'm sure this is in his head, but it makes him gag and throw up. And he used to have that reaction with potatoes, so it took a lot of time and effort of, okay, let me mash the potatoes and hide them in food. Now let me mash them a little bit less and leave them a little bit more chunky and mix them into food. And, you know, over time he's fine eating potatoes now, and he's fine eating most vegetables. It's mostly the lettuce that he still has an issue with, but Even at age 4, I'm not enforcing that. I would say that with a lettuce or something like that with a texture, you know, I would wait even longer. And of course, if you have a child with disabilities or developmental delays, you know, of course, everything is completely different, and I'm no expert on that because I don't have a child like that. I do think that sometimes there's a tendency of parents to think their child has maybe an underlying issue when the child does not, and the child is actually just taking advantage of the parent's goodwill, so I would watch out for that. But of course, if your child truly has a medical issue or a delay in that area, you know, of course you, or like an infant or a toddler, like I said, you want to, of course, account for that. So the final thing I want to talk about is snacking. And snacking is, I think it's a bane of modern motherhood. I don't think, what would you do with kids throwing food? Under 3, not older ones. Well, if they're old enough to understand not to do that, I would smack their hand if they throw the food. That's unacceptable. So snacking. I think it's a bane of modern motherhood. See, this whole idea of eating 5 or 6 smaller meals and snacks throughout the day is a dumb idea, and it's just not sustainable in a large family. I don't think it would be sustainable with a normal lifestyle where people are expected to work. I mean, imagine if you work a job and maybe you work in construction or you work in an office. What if you took 6 lunch breaks? I mean, the insanity. Or if you're just constantly going to the water cooler and taking a sip and constantly having to have something in your mouth. It's just a bad habit is what it is. But not only is it a bad habit, it's also very unhealthy. The insulin response is so much worse, and frequent small meals are very unhealthy. They, I think, are a contributing factor to people becoming insulin resistant and getting diabetic, because it's the insulin response is so bad when you're just constantly putting food in your mouth. And for people that struggle with that, for example, intermittent fasting, even if you don't change what you eat or how much you eat, but you simply change to eating only 8 hours out of any 24-hour period. So that's typically like maybe say from like you don't eat until 10 a.m. in the morning, and then you finish your last meal by 6 o'clock in the evening. Even if you don't change anything else about your eating habits, your health will improve. Your hormonal balance will improve. You will most likely lose weight. It is better for your insulin numbers and your cholesterol and everything. It's having just a couple of large meals over a smaller window of time is far healthier than just this incessant food coming through your mouth. And if you compare your body, like if you think of your body like a kitchen, think of your kitchen at home, and how clean would your kitchen be and how well maintained would your kitchen be and the rest of your house if somebody were going through your kitchen just at all hours of the day and night, whenever they want, getting in the fridge, making themselves a snack, eating this, spilling crumbs there. You would be exhausted trying to keep up with keeping the kitchen clean, and you could never really get it clean, and you could never get anything else done because you would be just full-time tied to the kitchen and maintaining that. Well, it's like that with your body's digestive system. If you're keeping your digestive system working 24/7, so much energy of your body is spent on digesting that food and keep running it through that your body doesn't have time to heal and repair and focus on other things. So not eating for an extended period of time is actually very good for your body, because then it can do things other than just keeping you fed and going. So snacking there comes in, because snacking, of course, not only does it keep you eating all the time, but it also makes it to where kids are not hungry at mealtimes. And when they're not hungry at mealtimes, they're like, nah, I don't really want to eat. I'm not hungry, because they're being picky. So snacking and picky eating go hand in hand. And not only do snacking and picky eating go hand in hand, but snacking also teaches kids, or rather it fails to teach kids, about delayed gratification, which is a very important life lesson to learn, that just because you're hungry, you don't have to act on that. And, there are more obese people in America than overweight people. And there are more obese or overweight people, either of those two categories, than there are healthy weight people in America. So I would be very, very cautious to adopt any dietary recommendations that are put out mainstream by a nation that has about 2/3 of the population predominantly obese or overweight. So the eating is just the snacking contributes to this, lack of learning to delay gratification. So in my house we do no snacks, and that sounds crazy and radical, and I guess to the American mind that is crazy and radical, but there's no reason for snacking. If you snack in the car while you're on the run, you're just going to make your car a gross mess. If you keep snacks in the house, then the kids are sure to get into it every time you leave the house. So it's very rare that I have. I mean, typically the only snack I keep in the house is granola bars, just stuff that I can grab on the way out for the baby, babies and toddlers will need more than 2 meals or 3 meals a day, and even kids need 3 meals a day. But for the toddlers and babies, of course, they need to eat far more frequently because they're growing at such an astounding rate and their stomachs are so little. So I do keep a couple of small things in the house, like granola bars is typically the only snack I have in the house, and they're intended for the baby if I run out the door. But we don't have goldfish or fruit snacks or anything like that. I don't even like for my kids to get into the fruit without permission, because I will buy a bag of apples, I mean like a huge bag, like a 10-pound bag of apples, and I will come home from maybe running an errand and the kids have taken 1 bite each out of 20 apples. So, that just doesn't fly. And I also don't like kids eating like an hour before dinner. They're like, but I'm hungry. That's a good thing to be. It's a good thing to be hungry by the time mealtime runs around. Kids shouldn't be just under the impression that they should never be hungry or never be thirsty. And if they are hungry or thirsty, they're just on the brink of death, and they must immediately satisfy that. So that is just not sustainable. It doesn't teach them anything about character. So snacking on many levels, health-wise, budget-wise, character-wise, snacking is just patently all around a bad idea and should be discouraged. The only time that a snack would be appropriate is if, for whatever unforeseen circumstance, a mealtime is majorly delayed, like more than, like, say, an hour or 2 delayed. Other than that, it's like, okay, you're hungry, that's all right. My mom used to have a saying, and she would always say, hunger and thirst are feelings that you have to learn to endure. I mean, we would be going hiking with no water on us. This is back before plastic water bottles. Back before plastic water bottles were common. I mean, we brought our water in glass bottles, and even then it was rare. And yeah, we would go hiking, and after the hike we had our choice between getting a drink, which in Germany you have to pay even for water. The water is not free. So we would get our choice between getting a bottle of a beverage, it could be soda or water, or getting an ice cream. So we got one or the other and nothing while we were hiking, and that I'm thankful for that. I can go all day. If I'm thirsty, I'm running errands, I can still go all day without just having to stop. And the drinking is another issue. I know somebody farther up asked about coffee and sodas. In our house we do not drink soda, we do not drink coffee, we do not even drink juice. Juice is not a healthy alternative to soda. If you're going to drink juice, you might as well drink soda. It's the same thing. So we drink water, we drink unsweetened tea, and that's pretty much the only things we're drinking. I will, for holidays, get like an orange soda that's like actually made with orange juice and carbonated water. So that's a rare treat. That, or like a ginger ale, for the Reed's ginger ale for Christmas. That's a real popular one. So for major holidays we'll get soda, and that's it. And when we go to the restaurant, it's water. Even if the soda is included for free, it's still water, because one day the soda will not be included for free, and then they'll have a habit of just wanting to drink soda. So it's a rare exception that we let them drink something other than water or tea. There's really no benefit to that. It just does nothing but teach a child gluttony. And I think that in the area of food, the Bible talks about the things for which the earth is disquieted, and one of them is a fool when he's filled with meat. And meat in the Bible, not just being meat, but being food. Our modern day word for that would be food. And many times when kids are filled with all the good food, and they have everything they want in the way of food, and they're eating well, and everything's just a party in their mouth, they become really spoiled and entitled. And there have been times in my family where we've had to say, you know what, you guys are all way too indulgent and you have it way too good, and you know what, for the next week it's going to be oatmeal for breakfast every day. Just a more humble meal, you know, more nutritious than maybe what they were even eating, or equally nutritious, but just a humbler meal. And I think that in the area of food in the 21st century in the United States, there is such a tendency and such a potential to be a glutton and to indulge the flesh. And because it is a basic human need, I think sometimes it's harder to say no to. I mean, of course, you know, parents would say, well, cutting out bad habits like cigarettes or alcohol, that's easy because it's like, well, you don't have to have that. You know, it's not a basic human need to get these horrible things. But we all do have to eat. So we have to strike a balance. We have to eat, but it's really easy to go overboard because we have such an abundance of wonderful food at our fingertips all the time, that it's very easy to become a glutton, or for kids to use this area to manipulate their parents, not because they're malicious, but because they're kids and they're just simply not making wise decisions. I mean, they would eat candy and soda all day if you let them. So yeah, there's in the comments, if in the chat, if you want to see, there's some good comments on coffee. So I don't drink coffee. Yes, it's true that coffee is very, very pesticide laden. So even if you switch to organic coffee, there is still the negative effects of caffeine on the adrenal glands. If you depend on coffee to keep you going, then you pretty soon have to drink coffee just to feel normal. And I don't want to go down that road, so I've never done coffee, because if I started drinking coffee and if I depended on coffee to get me through the day, I would need an IV line of it. So on days, I mean, very rarely, maybe once or twice a year, if I am out driving late at night and I'm very tired, I will get a black tea for the coffee to keep me awake. But that's incredibly rare, and because I don't usually drink it, you know, that actually works for me. So we don't do coffee. And, you know, typically people don't drink coffee black. That's the other thing. In order to make the coffee palatable, they have to add a ton of sugar and a ton of cream, and it just becomes just this liquid calorie bomb, which calories in liquid form are far worse for the body than anything that has to actually be digested. So the reason why coffee tastes so disgusting straight up black is because the human body is designed marvelously, and things that are bad for us are distasteful. So when something that you taste is so disgusting that you have to, you know, put cream in it and sugar in it to make it palatable, you know, maybe you just shouldn't be having it in the first place. So somebody asked if I eat oatmeal plain or sweeten it. I like my oatmeal just very slightly sweetened, like a half teaspoon of sugar for a cup of oatmeal. I like it slightly sweetened. I typically serve it sweetened for the kids. But I will say that one other thing that I found an effective method in parenting, so the one I already mentioned is that if kids do not work, or maybe I didn't mention, maybe I just meant to mention it. So, you know, the Bible says if any will not work, neither should he eat. And in America, that if you tell parents, well, you know, if they don't work, they can go to bed without their dinner, you will be accused of child abuse. And that's just horrible, and withholding food from a child is child abuse. But you have to realize you're not withholding food from the child. They can eat just as soon as they're done with their job. So nobody's telling them not to eat. Just as soon as they're done with their job, they can eat. Or if there's any other area, you know, where your child is being lazy and doesn't want to do what they're supposed to do, it's like, well, you know, you can just skip your next meal. You can eat when your job is done. So that's one way that food can be used as a parenting tool. The other way that I've often noticed is, you know, the Bible talks about a quiet, better is a dry morsel and quietness therewith. So when my kids are rude or mouthy with their siblings and they are saying things that they shouldn't say and are being very rude, then they get the dry morsel treatment. Now, my kids actually like dry bread. So if I said, okay, well, you're eating dry bread for your next meal, they'd be like, okay, score, I like that. So that's a pleasant meal to them. So I make a meal for them that they don't find quite so fun and don't quite find so pleasant by giving them oatmeal. And we've had the oatmeal cure a handful of times. And basically, I just make them oatmeal with oats and hot water, not even milk, just hot water and oats. And I neither sweeten nor salt it. It's just plain oats and hot water. And that's their next meal. If they have a problem blowing off their mouth, that's the dry morsel that they get. And that always seems to do the trick. When a child knows, hey, if I keep being rude and if I keep popping off at the mouth and I keep being harsh with my siblings and saying things I ought not, they get a bowl of oatmeal at the next meal, and we call that the dry morsel treatment. And again, we don't actually use a dry piece of bread because my kids love eating dry bread, so it wouldn't be a punishment. So that way they're not skipping a meal, they're not going hungry, they're just not having a party in their mouth. It's a humble meal. Oatmeal is a good humble meal to teach them that the world does not revolve around them, and that, just as the plain oatmeal is unpleasant in their mouth, pleasant words are as on honeycomb. So if they have unpleasant things to say, then they can have an experience of what that feels like. The unpleasant taste in their mouth is kind of a picture of the unpleasant taste that they leave in the other person's mouth when they're not using pleasant words. So that's the two ways that food can actually be used as a parenting tool of either, well, you don't want to work, then you can have your next meal when you are willing to eat. And if you want to pop off and be unpleasant, then you can just have an unpleasant meal. And then there was a question up there. Okay, so the drinking, I did want to touch on the drinking. Because the food, that's easy to see that, the 6 meals a day is foolishness and catering to kids. And, oh, you would like a spoonful less, you would like a spoonful more. Sure, let me jump right on that. And what else can I do for you while my food gets cold? It is not doing kids a favor to make them spoiled and for them to be used to being the center of the universe. Their future spouse will not thank you. Their future spouse will have to live with somebody who's either way too spoiled or somebody who will struggle their entire adult lives to overcome those bad habits. So it's easy to see in the food arena. Now comes the drinking. So there's this other idea that anytime you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. And that is just the biggest crock. That is just such utter nonsense. I wonder what people did before they had indoor plumbing and water coolers and plastic water bottles. That is just the biggest nonsense. The human body, again, is designed amazingly. Just like you're not suffering any harm when you are hungry, you're not suffering any harm when you are thirsty. And obviously, especially in Arizona, you could get dehydrated to the point where you are now getting sick. I understand that. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when kids sit down to do their schoolwork, and mine had a habit of this. They would sit down to do their schoolwork, and they hadn't been sitting down for 30 seconds yet when they get up and, well, now I need to get water. And then they get their water and they sit back down, and a minute later it's like, well, now I need the bathroom. And then they sit back down, and inevitably, 60 seconds later, they have a different need. So it's kind of like, the fact that bedtime is the leading cause of dehydration in children. Again, it's just children realizing this is a legitimate vital need, so I'm going to use this to try to exert power over my parents, try to manipulate them, or I'm just plain bored. And one of the best ways to see this is at church. So there was a time in our church where it was like one big water party. Like every minute, one kid or another would be out of their chair, getting water from the water cooler, and then sitting back down, and then getting up again. And it was just one big water party. Just go to the water cooler, go to the bathroom, go to the water cooler multiple times in the same service. So that was just complete nonsense and completely out of hand. Kids do it out of boredom. Kids do it because they like to mess with their parents. Kids do it for all sorts of reasons. So the human body has a wonderful thing called a stomach and a wonderful thing called a bladder. So you can drink and then not drink again for an hour or two, and you will be perfectly fine. So, and you don't have to, the second that you feel the slightest twinge that you have to go to the bathroom, you do not immediately that second have to go. So it's great for kids to learn that their body was made with the capability to hold off eating, to hold off drinking, and to hold off every trip to the bathroom until maybe they can consolidate a few of those trips instead of going every 5 minutes. And I realized this when my kids would walk over to the water cooler with their cup in hand, and they would literally pull the spigot for 1 second, get a sip, and then they'd go back and pull it for 1 second and drink a sip. And they would do that 3 or 4 times, and then they would put the cup down, and then they would be back, because I checked the clock, like less than a half hour later. They would be back like 10 minutes later and repeat the whole, spigot down for a second, drink a sip, get a sip, drink a sip, get a sip, and they would do this. Now imagine if you worked like, say, in a construction crew and you drank like that. Could you even imagine if you're back at the big orange water cooler just taking 1 sip every minute? You would be fired. It would be unsustainable. No work would ever get done. You would just make a full-time job of putting bites and sips through your mouth. So of course that's nonsense. So now the rule for our kids is that, when they do their schoolwork, they have to drink water beforehand, and then they don't get any until we break, which we typically do schoolwork for an hour and a half at a time, and then we break. And then so we typically do an hour and a half in the morning, then there's a little recess, and then we do like maybe another hour until lunch. And then of course at lunch they can also drink and eat, and after that, when it's nap time, we typically do just an hour, hour and a half of schoolwork. And again, during that time they are not to get out of their chair. They are to sit down. And it seems crazy but funny, I went to school and we were only allowed to use the bathroom and get food and water during our scheduled breaks, which was every hour and a half, 2 class periods back to back, and then we would get a 5-minute break to get water and use the bathroom. And we did not even get a lunch break at school. We would have 6 class periods, so 2, then a 5-minute break, 2 more class periods, a 5-minute break, 2 class periods, and then we would be home for lunch by about 1 o'clock. School got out and we would go home for lunch. School in Germany does not run near as late. So if it worked for thousands of kids that I went to school with, and we all turned out fine, and we didn't even bring water bottles to school, we just drank during our scheduled breaks, and we were just fine. There was no such thing as a hall pass to use the bathroom during class. If you had to use a bathroom during class, you had to raise your hand, hi pups, and ask the teacher. So you only did that if you really needed to use a bathroom, not just for fun because you wanted to go on a little walkabout in the hallway. So that's kind of just a tangent of the eating. But I would say just in general, if it's driving you nuts, feel free to change things up and to tighten up the discipline surrounding mealtimes. It will be better for you and it will be better for the children. And don't just be riddled with anxiety and guilt. Kids are masters at manipulation. And so I'm going to look through the questions, and if you have any other questions, feel free to send them my way. I went a little long today and I'm sorry for that. Let's see here. Do you sit and finish all your food at the dining room table? Yes, they are not allowed to walk around while they eat. Now, we don't have a dining room table big enough for all of us, and we could have one if I wanted one, but I do not enjoy eating a meal with 12 people. I actually prefer to eat by myself, so we kind of break it up where the older kids eat in the schoolroom and the younger kids eat at the kitchen counter. And then I typically take my dish completely away from any of them and eat by myself. But they have to sit down in one of the couple of food areas that we have while they eat. Force water during pregnancy. No, I don't think water is the best way to hydrate anyway. So especially during pregnancy, I do not drink straight up water. I virtually never drink straight up water when I'm pregnant. I typically drink very strongly diluted tea. So I make like 1 jar of tea, and then I dilute that with water, and when it starts getting low, I add water to that. So it's very diluted tea, or you could add a little lemon juice or cucumber slices. All that will change the alkalinity and the electrolytes in the water, and that'll actually make it far more hydrating than water alone. In fact, if you go hiking here in Arizona and all you drink is water, you can actually get hyponatremia, where you pass out from having water intoxication. You have too much water and it dilutes your electrolytes and the salts in your body to a point where you get sick from having too much water. So, yeah. The Oliver Twist menu, yeah, that's right. I know somebody commented about the apples. It's funny because in Tom Sawyer, or is it Huckleberry Finn, you know, where he gets in trouble for stealing apples. And I used to not understand that story as a kid. I do understand it as an adult, and where an apple was considered a treat. I already talked about the coffee, so I don't think there are any other questions here. So I don't see any other questions. I still breastfeeding. What do you recommend as an alternative? As an alternative to breastfeeding, I would switch a 19-month-old to cow's milk, unless they have allergies, which your chances of the child developing allergies are far less if you use unpasteurized whole milk from a grass-fed cow. And or you could even use goat's milk if you're concerned about allergies. The goat's milk is closer to human milk. And again, if you find a good source of clean goat's milk where you can leave it whole and it's not pasteurized, it's not homogenized, that's really good as far as switching a baby to that. I don't see any other questions on here. So if you have a question, which tea do I drink? I like pregnancy tea, but I don't always drink that. When I'm pregnant, I also like to drink peppermint tea. One of my very favorite teas, regardless of whether I'm breastfeeding or pregnant, it's very healthy, is rooibos tea. Rooibos, rooibos tea. It's very hydrating, very healthy. It's good for pregnancy. It is good for electrolytes. It's good for breastfeeding. So that's one of my favorite teas. I like hibiscus tea is another good one that's very fruity and sweet. So yeah, the hiking in Arizona, they actually know that people that live here will warn you about that water alone is not enough. The water alone will make you sick. There have been people who died at the Grand Canyon because they drank 4 or 5 gallons of water and diluted the electrolytes to where they passed out and died in the heat. So you need the electrolytes, you need the salt. The thing we see at our church more often than anything from visitors that come from out of town is not that they don't drink enough water. It's that they drink too much water and do not consume enough salt, and they get sick, and they get very sick. Sometimes they even get hospitalized, they pass out. You must get high quality mineral rich salt along with your water, or all the water will not help you. Do I use honey for sweetener? I do in my oatmeal sometimes. I do not sweeten my teas or beverages at all. I am a firm believer in not consuming any liquid calories. It's just not good for blood sugar. A 3-year-old that doesn't eat anything but fruit, mac and cheese, and yogurt. Well, I've tried the no food, no eat method. It doesn't work. Well, then you didn't try it, because if the child gets hungry enough, they will eat anything. So I would say if they're that picky, I would only work on one food at a time and start with the one that you can introduce easiest. Like if they already like fruit, maybe switch from fruit to vegetables that are like fruit, like for example, like cooked carrots or sweet corn or avocados and tomatoes. So try to introduce foods gradually over time, and you could add maybe stuff to the mac and cheese, things like that. But yeah, it's going to take a lot of effort. I think it's easy to prevent these things than have to fix them. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you want to prevent this in your children, one good way is to eat a varied diet yourself while you're pregnant. That develops a child's taste buds for those things. And then when they start eating, just feed them table foods of things you like. When they're young, let them experiment with it. Let them feed themselves. When they are older, I found that them cooking the food helps greatly in helping with them wanting to eat the food and liking the food. So yeah, the prevention there is key. Otherwise, you just have to slowly over time work hard at reintegrating things that they have rejected. An average amount of food I would recommend. No, that's hard to say. I think if you look online, so I did years and years ago in a magazine, I saw a chart of portion sizes for different ages, and I don't have it. I used to have it laminated on the side of my fridge, and I used that for a long time. So I think if you go to Google and you just search for portion sizes for children, you will get a good idea of what to expect at different ages, and just use that as a rule of thumb. I forget what magazine I found it in, but it was just a good thing. And that's when I started deciding, okay, well, this is an average amount. You're not that unique. You can eat an average amount, just like restaurants have standard set amounts of what they do. What are my thoughts on baby-led weaning? Baby-led weaning is when kids introduce the food themselves, I think, and they go straight to table food. So we have gone to table foods for our babies ever since Solomon was a baby. So Solomon was the first one that ate jarred baby food, and we just feed the baby whatever we're eating. So if I make oatmeal or cream of wheat for breakfast, I will feed them a little bit of that. I will mash them a banana. If we're having, say, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, I will just mash a little bit of the potatoes and carrots and put some of the gravy in for them. They can eat yogurt, so they eat table foods right from the beginning. Mashed, so some really good foods for the kids are mashed avocados, mashed bananas, yogurt, eggs. Scrambled eggs are one of the very healthiest first foods. Meat is a very, very good first food, contrary again to what is taught, where they say introduce grains first. I typically do not like to introduce grains first. I prefer to introduce the meat before I introduce the grains. So just things that we eat that can easily be pulled out and separated so they're not being overwhelmed. Fruit is actually one of the ones that should be introduced last, especially like an acidic fruit like strawberries. That can cause allergies. So yeah, just steamed veggies, meat, yogurt, those things are all good to introduce a baby with. I think those are all the questions. I will just wait for another second. Otherwise, I hope to see you back here next Friday around the same time. Supposedly, well, we are supposed to move back into our house on Thursday. And I can't really see that happening right now. I'm trying to get this rental here extended. Somebody else is supposed to stay here next weekend, so hopefully the landlord can move that tenant to a different property so we can stay here another week or two, because the house is not done and I can't see it getting done by next Thursday. There's just still a lot of work, and even just the cleaning alone, it seems like it would take a week, because everything is covered. I mean, literally everything in the entire house is covered in a layer of dust and dirt in every room of the house. I have to literally wash every single item in the entire house. Every piece of clothing, everything has to be washed and clean and then put away. So please pray that we can extend this house here, because I just cannot move yet again before we move home. So I would like to stay here until we go home. I can't imagine having to move twice more, once more to a new rental and then back home. I'm really hoping we can stay here. So right now it's up in the air. The landlord is trying to get that worked out, so we'll see. But if you can please pray for that. Anyway, if you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I will try to respond to them. But just my parting advice would be, if it's driving you crazy, you're doing it wrong. And don't feel bad, don't feel guilty. The kids, it's better for them if they bear some of the responsibilities. It's better for them if they learn to delay their gratification, if they learn that the world doesn't revolve around them, if they learn to go hungry and thirsty at times. And if it's driving you nuts, you're doing it wrong. And that's not how God intended. I mean, mothering and parenting is of course work, so there are hard and difficult moments. But if you're struggling all the time and you're riddled with guilt and you're at the end of your rope all the time, you're doing it wrong. Correct thy son and he shall give thee rest. So if you are completely overwhelmed all of the time, then probably it's because you are doing too much and expecting too little. So anyway. Alrighty, well, thank you for joining me today, and you all have a wonderful weekend.